What's up, people? Don Martelli here, host of the PR Bunker, back with another episode. In the trenches today, talking to my man, Brian Farber. Lives up in Concord, Massachusetts, works in the public affairs space. His business is called Monument Strategies, LLC. Met him through a communicators network, which is a Slack community for PR folks. Had a wonderful conversation. Went a little bit longer than I would kind of expected, to be honest with you, but we kind of did this word association thing, and he kind of flipped it on me. Interviewed me, which is kind of weird because I'm the guy usually interviewing people versus being interviewed. So appreciate Brian stopping by the bunker. His work in the public affairs area is incredible. I suggest you reach out to him if you want to learn more about it. I'll be sure to link to his website and so on and so forth. But Brian Farber, thanks for stopping by the PR Bunker. Enjoy the episode. Hello, friends. Welcome to the latest episode of the PR Bunker. I am your host, Don Martelli, CEO of the PR Bunker, Strategic Communications and Marketing Strategy, working with mission-driven and impact-focused organizations. I had the pleasure of interviewing a lot of smart people that have done incredible work in the nonprofit communications PR space. And Brian Farber, who is my guest today, as I'd say here in Boston, Farber, he and I have run in similar circles over the years. Pleasure to have him. And it'll be an interesting conversation because we kind of cut from the same cloth when it comes to the PR side. But Brian, thank you for joining me today. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
I appreciate you having me. I really do. I don't know. This may be the first podcast I've ever been on, and definitely the first podcast in a bunker. Needless, nevertheless, a PR bunker.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, I appreciate you joining us. So
thank you.
Where in the world are you calling in from today?
I'm actually in Concord, Massachusetts.
Excellent.
My family moved up here 10 years ago, or almost 11 years ago, from Washington, D.C.
Got it.
And we started renting this beautiful home in, well, actually, it was a small cape that was pretty run down in Concord. And then the landlord sadly died. And so then we wound up buying it from the family. But now we've made it our beautiful home and
awesome.
Honored the family, promised them we'd keep it the same color, and we have. And here we are with
two
kids and a dog.
Not easy to keep that color the same color because the New England weather is pretty brutal on homes these days, especially up north where you are in the Concord area. But
the secret we learned, Don, is stain your house, not paint your house.
Valid. Absolutely valid.
And it's yellow.
There you go. Ours is it's kind of a beige yellowish, so we kind of have the same home. And I also live in a Cape, which is your typical New England home. But anyways,
it's correct.
This is not a real estate show, but nice little diversion. But I always start with this conversation with just like, tell us briefly about your story, because most people I have in this podcast have done some cool stuff and they've gotten here. And oftentimes we all have broken, kind of crazy stories that plant you where you are in Concord today. So tell my audience about yourself a little bit, and let's get into it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah. So as I mentioned, we've been up here for 11 years, and my path through this career has been, as I know yours has been, a little bit, it's been like a maze, or in our world of public relations and communications, it's more like a gauntlet, right? So I got my lucky break in press a bunch of years ago when a congressman I was working for, a U.S. congressman in New York, asked me to move from his district office down to D.C. And he said, "You're a great storyteller." I'd been working with constituents all the time and turning them into campaign stories. And he said, "I love your writing. I love that you have a connection to the district." And he moved me down to DC. And then I became press secretary. I moved to another campaign, became communications director for that. I'd been doing policy work as well, campaigns, politics. And then after a few years there, I moved to the Obama administration as a White House appointee, and congressional affairs, public engagement, policy, and again, press, which was an incredible experience, rewarding, scary as all get out. I was about to curse, but I don't know if that's appropriate for your show.
We are appropriately throwing F-bombs on the PR Bunker from time to time.
That's great.
Feel free.
In the episodes I listened to, I didn't hear that. And then we moved up here to Massachusetts, and I got this great job at Autodesk. I worked there for almost 7 years, leading their global program for the architecture, engineering, construction space, where we did a lot of different things, bringing humanity to the story of construction rather than just product launches. I give a lot of credit to Clay Helm, who said, we need storytellers, not just product tellers. And she really believed in the whole person who comes to work. And I appreciated her greatly for taking that chance on me. And then worked for a battery tech company, a startup, doing some really cool stuff, helped them with government relations and communications. I helped them secure over $2 million from federal grants that didn't exist before. And now I decided after a while just to do my thing, because I hated, as I know you do, even though it says PR back there, you're not a one-trick pony. you know, you love doing so much in terms of engagement, storytelling, not just pitching media. You are a true to form strategist,
Love
and
that.
we're the checkers versus chess guys, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to lead to that place. I mean, what drives you to do what you do? Why do you
Hmm.
love the gig, and why do you equate it to playing checkers and chess? Because I agree with you.
Yeah, yeah. I gotta say, what I love about this gig, about waking up in the morning and having my own clients, is that I get to do things that they probably wouldn't have expected,
Mm-hmm.
right? So one client, a nonprofit, they brought me in to do some communications work, but they had just lost their Institute of Museum and Library Services federal program. It was eliminated under this administration.
Mm-hmm.
No commentary there. That's
Yeah,
not what
yeah.
this is about. And but that was cut. And they're a
Mm-hmm.
small Black History museum here in
Mm-hmm.
Concord
Mm-hmm.
called the Robbins House. And when they brought me on, that was the goal, was just to build a brand awareness. But then we started to talk about some of the challenges they had with fundraising.
Mm-hmm.
So I helped them with messaging there. And then I said, have you ever engaged your stakeholders like legislators at the state and federal level? Well, why don't we use that as a communications tool to get your word out there about the struggles? But maybe we can try to get appropriations. And so we've been working through that now, and we're seeing really great success. And that's what I love about waking up in this role. And that's what chess versus checkers is. I
Mm.
can wake up, you do it. You can put together a press release. You can do the tactical. You can maybe write some social posts. You can pitch a story to the media, whatever. You've got contacts. You know what you're doing. That's the day-to-day tactical, right? That to me is checkers. But then the chess is people who have that broader experience who can think, maybe today isn't the day to pitch to New York Times or
Mm.
a trade publication. I know people love to say the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, but
Mm-hmm.
but maybe it's about getting you in front of an association like the U.S. Conference of Mayors to talk about this
Mm.
initiative
Mm-hmm.
and to speak to your really audiences and try to
Mm-hmm.
get in front of them. So that's what I mean by
Yeah.
chess.
Well,
It's
I tell you what.
multi-layered.
Oftentimes you're sitting across the table from an opponent, and whether they're the chess master
Opponent, I
or
like it
not,
already.
yeah, opponent, right? You get into the spot where you're trying to always stay ahead of your clients and keep things moving. And the opponent in this particular case is the media, is our client's interest, the media, whatever they want to cover, or just an audience we're trying to communicate with. There's just so many distractions, and so when you think about sort of that chess, checkers analogy, there's I wouldn't say it's not scary, but there are moments where business and being a solopreneur, there is this sort of the hair in the back of your head stands up because you're like, you're about to get into some things and you realize the client has an expectation, what the media wants, and you get into these scary moments. So when I say scary situation, scary story, what comes to your mind?
God. Yeah. So we're going to do that.
Yeah.
One of the scariest moments I recall was when I had been pulled up into the secretary's office, Secretary of Transportation, 55,000 person department. I had this great, director who, I'll name her because she's great. I have nothing bad to say. Megan Keck, or now Megan Thurlow, and
Hmm.
she's over at GE Aerospace doing cool things. And it wound up being her last few weeks of work, and she was going to be checking out. And that week, I won't go into too much detail just because it's a little gory, but
Hmm.
an FAA contractor went into a tower, a network center, and cut the wires and tried to he tried to commit suicide,
Hmm.
and he
Hmm.
set fire to the center as
Wow.
well, and it shut down all the network, and it created this mayhem. And she said, and I was supposed to go to a bachelor party weekend, and I was really new to this work, and she said she had it, and she did, but then it just didn't go away. She ended
Mm.
on that Friday. I went off to my weekend, and it was scary because now all of a sudden I was in charge, and I didn't really know that. I
Mm.
didn't
Hmm.
understand what that
Hmm.
meant.
Hmm.
And so when I arrived where I was going, there was just a list of emails from reporters and people who were looking for help. They were trying to understand, what is our message, and
Yeah.
it's like, oh my God, this is mine. And it was the first time where I had to call the secretary in the middle of the evening or night to say, here's what we've got. This is the situation. And it was Megan who had to talk me through, and she goes, you own this now, right?
Mm. Hmm.
And she was great through that weekend. She coached me. She was out of the job already, but it was a scary time and this is public, where at the time the FAA, the air traffic controllers were back to using paper on boards
Wow.
and moving pieces around to move the traffic. And it was tough. Like, it was
Hmm.
hard. And that wasn't just about the issue. It was about recognizing that for the first time, a game plan mattered, understanding handoff and pass off and not to freak out because I was freaked out. And, but when the secretary hung up and said, all right, thanks for letting me know,
Hmm.
or thanks for keeping me informed, were his words. He was in the middle
Hmm.
of a thing. And that's when I knew. I was like, okay, I can do this. He wanted to hear from me. I need to pick up the phone. And that was a scary career moment. The scariest press story, I won't go into it unless it comes up later, but was when the Ebola crisis hit in, I think it was 2014. That's a different
Yikes.
story. But
Well, the
yeah,
commonality there is that, in those moments when the shit is hitting the fan, oftentimes, people forget about just basic communications principles. And often we
yeah,
are the people that have to bring calmness to the shitstorm, right?
yeah,
This
yeah,
virus is breaking. This is going on. I mean,
yeah,
there's a massive virus that's basically shutting down the country. Like, what do we do? It's usually communications that brings people back to reality, keeps them informed, and so on and so forth. And sometimes, luckily enough, and sometimes not luckily enough, we are the guys and gals that just sit in those rooms that have the microphone in front of us that have to answer the bell, and it's kind of what we get paid for. So
right.
there's those good, but there's also like good stories.
Yeah, oh,
Like,
yes.
I'd love to hear, like, when you think about your career and the stuff you've placed and stuff that you never thought would be news, like, what's that like? How do you react to just the term awesome story, good story?
Well, I would ask you that first, just
Okay,
because, you're always behind the mic asking people questions,
sure.
but your story, I don't know if you get to share your story too. And you're an
Time to
interesting guy.
time.
When we spoke in December, I was like, this guy is doing some really good work and impactful work. So I'd love to hear either
Sure.
your
I got
3
one.
a.m. email or phone call or your best story.
Yeah. So here's when people ask me what makes me different than other folks they work with, I say nothing but everything because everybody's different. Everybody has their own opinion on stuff. And what I'm pretty good at is finding the story amongst just a noise of information. And so one
Yeah.
example of mine, folks that I work with, an organization is called Hearth. They are looking to end elder homelessness in Boston, right? A really
Yeah.
tough situation. These are folks that are just dealing with some stuff. And so I have a friend of mine that works at the Globe who covers just health and human services and just general stuff going on in Boston. I know that she was working on a story about affordable housing and its impact on seniors generally in greater Boston. And so I learned early on with Hearth about the story of this woman named Lisa, who was in a very bad relationship and basically found herself living on the street because she had no other option. Lisa ended up getting connected with Hearth, started to volunteer, eventually started working for the organization, now works on behalf of Hearth, working with people that have gone through what she's gone through. And so I talked to Liz. I said, hey, like, you're working on this story, but let me give you the micro. Let me tell you about Lisa. She's the micro of this story you're covering. She talked to Lisa, talked to Hearth. The story was basically globally talking about affordable housing and its impact on seniors, but through the lens of Lisa and her journey. And
Yes.
now that she's working for Hearth. That content I then take, and it was on the front page of the Metro, a big photo, the whole thing. I took that content, spun it into a marketing campaign, a week and a half sprint, and it resulted in several gifts, resulting in six figures for the organization, two of which came from anonymous donors.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so when I think about storytelling and that happy moment, it's telling Lisa's story, which was horribly descriptive, but it ended really well. And it's a micro of what was going on with Hearth, with the organization. I love mission driven, impact focused clients because I get the honor and privilege to find those stories, cultivate them, and tell the shit out of them so people, care and they act. And so that's kind of why the bunker was created, because I'm in the trenches with my clients, building those relationships because I want to tell those stories because they have to be told.
And I love that story because, you could have easily have said, I have this tech company that got this great product and we talked about AI, right? And I know that for so many, that is a win. And that'd be a win for me. Look, I love that. But, when you tell that kind of story, when I talk about the Robbins house, or I talk about it seems I have two clients that have the house in their name, the greenhouse about grief, and families who've lost a child
Hmm.
and they're trying to raise money for the greenhouse anyway. You get to wake up in the morning and not think about the success of that story. You get to think also about how did Lisa feel about having her story heard,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And so you get the win as a communications professional, but you're giving her a voice that she probably never had or would have thought, or people like her who identify with her. And that, it's almost like this guy, Dave Valentin. He worked for, may still work for UPS. And we were doing something when I was with the Obama administration that, again, they used to tell the stories about the DOT, how much money, how many billions they would invest, or how many miles of asphalt they laid, and how expensive this bridge was. And I wanted to tell this different kind of story, and we were trying to get out there to talk about impact of improvements to infrastructure. And I wound up calling someone who, I don't know how I was introduced to them. I just called around and found this guy, Jay Valentin, who works at UPS, worked, I believe, in New Jersey, right outside New York City. And we talked about I talked with him about, his job, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he started to tell me about how these drivers in those big brown vehicles at the time, and still today, don't really have shocks. So when they would hit potholes, some of them would injure their ankles
Mm.
and they couldn't
Wow.
drive.
Wow.
If the traffic was so bad, or I think it was some sort of number that if all trucks stopped for 15 minutes, it was an X number of dollars lost for the company, and they wouldn't meet their goals and
Mm-hmm.
times. So we sent the secretary there to their facility where he did calisthenics with them in the morning because they have to stretch
Nice.
every day, learns how to
Nice.
move things safely. And, this is a guy who just spent his career driving the truck and never thought that people would share the story about how cold it was,
Mm.
how many delays there were, how he couldn't get to the soccer field to see his
Mm-hmm.
kids play soccer, and it brings a human focus into an infrastructure issue.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Well, that's what we do, right? We go find the story and we get it placed. And so I'm gonna pivot real quick because I have an idea.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm gonna say a couple words, and I want you to just rip back what you think right off the rip once I say the words. Okay. First, and it all pertain to communications, PR,
Improv,
and yeah,
improv.
improv. Yep. So,
But just
'cause
remember, I'm going to flip it around on you.
yeah, totally fine, totally fine.
This gives me like Miss
Ready?
Palace math class quiz
Good.
anxiety from
It's
sixth
all
grade.
good. Ready? Oxford comma.
Love it.
Hate
It's
it.
not about the reader. It's about my pause. I get
Hate
to
it.
pause.
Hate it.
That's
Hate it.
fine.
I could
Look,
use a period. I use
we
a
can have
period.
we can have a discussion. I'm not going to
It's
pick a
all
fight
good.
with you
Yeah,
in
all
an
good.
alley over it, but that's cool. I'm not going to
There's
talk about Red Sox
there's
Yankees. I'm not
there's
going to talk
there's
about.
definite love it or hate it camps when it comes to Oxford commas. Okay,
I'm gonna
another
I'm
one
gonna
for
ask
you.
you one. I'm
All
gonna
right,
ask you
got it.
one.
Yep.
M dashes.
Dashes. I'm probably taking him out to the alley and putting him in the dumpster. Yeah, because if you need to finish your sentence and your thought, stop and just start
Yeah.
another one, right?
Look,
But they can be effective. Like if you're looking to create like a moment, and,
Yep.
and they're better delivered when you're giving a speech versus reading on the screen. I think they have more effective. But for the most part, like the Oxford comma and the M dash, I'm taking that guy out to the alley.
Yeah. Look, I know you see people on LinkedIn talking about like Perry Hedrick,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and so many other people. They love to pick those fights, and that's fine. I don't think
Yeah.
he really cares, but
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. He gets 200 something clicks every time
Yeah.
he posts something. That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
But it represents something different for me on use of AI. I'm cool
Okay.
with people using AI
Yeah.
because remember the output is only as good as the input. And if you're a good
Totally.
communications professional who understands empathy, who understands a story, the nuance of a story, you can get the right output, right?
Agreed.
But if you look at what's going on and you see now everybody has M dashes, which
Yeah.
to me is similar to everybody has that same, or so many people have that same cadence from ChatGPT, which is,
Mhm.
now let me tell you why that matters, colon,
Yeah.
boom, right?
Yeah. Bueller.
And so
Anyone? Yeah.
it's the same thing. So I think it represents more than M dashes to me,
Agreed.
because Mrs. Gobetz in sixth grade,
Yeah.
another sixth grade teacher.
Yeah.
I was in this creative writing, this accelerated writing class in sixth grade. It was the last time I was ever in anything accelerated. And I wrote with M dashes even then, like handwrite, written, because it was, for me, a pause and a side explanation of something or clarification. And I liked it. She asked me about it. I was like, I don't know why I do this. I never thought it'd come full circle
Feels good.
into a scarlet letter. I don't know.
So I highly expect you to see you walking around the neighborhood with Team M Dash on a T-shirt somewhere. That's good stuff.
I will buy you one. And I'm also
Love that.
I'm gonna also come up with a T-shirt that says PR bunker hearts, commas, or
No
something.
way, man. We're black and white. We start the sentence, end it with a period, get on with your day. So another. Okay, good. You're next.
I wanted to ask you, media fragmentation. This is a serious one, I guess.
Yeah. So I think it's back in my days from the 93 to about late 90s when I was at the Globe prior to paywalls.
The days when you received your pitches by fax?
Yes, correct. And you actually read the newspaper and got ink in your finger.
Yeah, I loved it.
less media, but the media was heavy and important and covered, told stories. These days, everybody, and I mean everybody, is the media. We can produce
Yeah.
content at a
Yeah.
feverish pace. So when I think about media fragmentation, I think of there's more channels for us at our disposal as PR guys to get content placed, which means there's more to pay attention to, there's more to focus on, and there's just more volume, which makes it easier and harder at the same time. I think it's diluted the traditional news sources because people are sourcing content from anywhere. Oh, did you hear this?
Yeah.
Did you watch this thing on Reddit? Did you see this thing on YouTube? Did you see the Globe? And so I think it's fragmentation just by the sense of the word. I think it was an hourglass that got dropped and it's created just all types of just glass that sat in the sand and in the water and over time is turned into sea glass. And I
Yeah.
think that fragmentation is only going to continue with speed, more channels, and it's becoming more and more important as individuals to filter and to disseminate on your own without being told what the news is. Prior to that, you could trust news sources like the Globe, the Times, the Journal. And there was a little bit of like kind of gray area, but generally there was a true trust. These days, you never know. Like this interview between you and I could be AI. You and I could not even be talking right now, right? So media
Are we?
fragmentation. We are. We're definitely. I'm picturing myself,
No
right?
one, no one's going to want this as AI.
Yeah, yeah. If this was AI, I'd have no gray in the beard and have some hair. But when I think of again fragmentation, it's more speed, it's truth and not truth, and just it creates a bit of a challenge. Yet same time, an opportunity for us PR and comms folks just to think broader, wider, and more kind of
Yeah.
micro content versus kind of your typical press release days. So how about you?
Yeah. 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 I'll take it from the other side, from the view, because you've covered that so well. It's first of all, I feel badly for all the old time
Mm,
reporters out there, the
hmm
solid reporters, and I feel bad for all those young people who wanted to be
mm,
aspiring journalists in some of the big publications. But from the reader side, the consumer side, I'm really nervous about fragmentation because, and this isn't new. I'm not creating some sort of new idea here. But at the end of the day, I'm really concerned about what's true, what's not, right? And that everyone has gone into their little caves and are just going after subscribing to the talking points they want most, right? And that's why I go to a site called Memorandum. I don't know if you've heard of Memorandum. It's Memeorandum. Memorandum. And one of my former bosses introduced me to that way back. Susie Yemerling, is not her name. And so so Memorandum is basically a compilation of news articles. It can be from the
got
New
it.
York Times or some
Okay.
other publications. It's not
So a
always the big
curation.
mainstream. Yeah, and it's political, it's policy, it's current events. And so I almost can't choose what I'm reading, but I'll see the
Mm,
headline and I'll see the topic and it breaks it up into topics and it's very simple. It's just not, it's not something you don't know what you're gonna get, right? And it gives you good news coverage. But I do look, my neighbor is a big Fox guy. I'm not necessarily. We'll talk about stuff in the street. I'll see him on it. You know, I'm a dork who still loves to watch hearings on C-SPAN.
nice.
But, I'm nervous about how we've all found our little holes and
Hmm.
live in the consumption of news.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
hard.
you bring up a good point, which kind of connects to my next sort of last kind of question and topic of conversation here today is because of technology and media
Can I
and
ask a question? This
information.
is your podcast.
Yeah, it is my podcast.
Why does it have to be 30 minutes?
Because I have an attention span of a squirrel and Adderall. I'm on to the next thing in 2 seconds, right?
I'll keep you focused.
I'm sure you will. But when I think about technology, I think about media, I think about content, I think about information overload. I feel more so these days than probably in the last, I'd say, 5 years or so, that human to human connection is becoming more important in business than ever before. Because the technology we have in front of us can expedite the networking and meeting people.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you and I have a mutual friend, shout out Mark, right?
Mark?
And that we got reconnected to, and we had a couple conversations. Now we're building this relationship between the two of us, and yeah, we compete in the PR space, but we don't do the same stuff, so we can collaborate. So, what's your thought process these days on networking and the blending of technology, but like taking back relationships and building through
Yeah.
like, know, and trust? What's your vibe on that?
Yeah, a strong vibe. I gotta tell you, as a sole practitioner and
Hmm.
doing my thing, you have to build relationships and they have to be human and we have to have these connections. I don't see you as a competitor because I'm
Hmm.
not gonna be a 200-person shop who wants to own everything, right? I've been reading a lot of your stuff and listening to your podcast, and I've learned a lot from you. And sharing these stories makes me feel like I'm not alone. So I don't see you as a competitor. I see you
Hmm.
as someone who at some point you use the word collaborator.
Hmm.
I also see you as potentially a sub or
Hmm.
something that when I have something that just may be too complicated for one person,
Same.
we work together,
Yeah.
right? So this idea that we're competitors, but more so the idea that we should be working together and connecting and building relationships as many as we can.
Mm.
I think that's got to be.
Yeah.
But, because I do want to have business, if people are interested in learning more about me, they can feel free to reach out to Brian at monumentsquare.llc,
Yep.
monumentsquare.llc. My first
Love
name's
that.
Brian, and I'm Monument Square Strategies. I picked a name right here in the center of town in Concord,
Perfect. On
where
brand.
I thought it was a simple, like the Dewey Square groups,
Yeah.
the Global Park groups,
Yeah.
all those. And then also because I feel like in Monument Square, I'm a student of history that
Nice.
every inch here tells a mile long story in Concord, and I felt like that's what I wanted to do. So
Okay.
I
So
deal with, yeah.
you open the door real quick in history, and I got to ask you this question: If
Oh,
you're
please.
creating your own, if you're creating your own Rushmore, right, and you've got five faces to put up on that based on your life, your network, your business, the people you've met,
Network.
your network, who's on your
I mean, not like a president or
doesn't
anything.
matter. Anybody that's important to you.
Wow. Okay.
A little left field question. Why not?
I got to tell you, like, I want to see like a Harriet Tubman up there. I want to see an Ellen Garrison up there. Ellen Garrison is someone who in the 80s was born to, in a family where it was previously there were slaves here in right here in Acton and Concord and New Jersey. They came together, created the Robbins and Garrison family. And I would love to see someone like her because in the 1800s, she went across the United States and taught.
Mm,
She helped people through civil rights.
mm,
Civil rights in the 1800s. She had basically what was basically a passport, so that people would know she was a freed person, a free
mm,
person,
mm.
and so she could travel. And we need
More
a
of
little
those.
more in our country.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when you open the door to history, I figured you'd had a story of an individual, somebody that would go on, and I love that analogy because I think you're right. I think we should all have a passport in some way, shape, or form to kind of get to where we want to get to, and I do appreciate your friend of history. And I was a bit of a history geek too. Not that I recalled any of it all, but just it was the richness of the stories, the personalities, the people, the impact, the emotion, right? The wins, the losses, the awful stuff that has happened in the past that we've all learned from, and
Have we?
yeah, I don't. Well, I mean, I have as an individual. We have
Yeah,
as a
yeah, yeah.
society, probably not. But I'm a big believer that every person you connect with, everything you've gone through, every experience you've ever had, good, bad, ugly, awful, just teaches you something. And for me with my business and what I do and how I do it, how I approach the work, it's because of everything I went through. I mean, I loved working for big brands like the Subways and Home Depot and Harvard University and all that stuff. But like being able to tell Lisa's story, right, in a way that was compelling to like, so the tears are jerked and people gave and they gave money and they gave a shit. That's the impact that I feel like I owe it. I owe
Yep.
this to the community. And I feel like that's why you and I hit it off well, because you're kind of got that same mindset. And I know that you have a certain type of client you like to work with, and you do that because you want to give back. But I mean, if people were interested in working with you, what's that look like? What kind of clients you want to work with, and where do you
Yeah.
excel?
Oh, great question. So right now I'm working with a few startups. First of all, I've had a great time serving as a mentor to a startup
Nice.
through TechStars Boston. It was the first time I was really engaged. That's a lot of fun, and not as I feel like I'm giving them value, or I was giving them value. Their program ended, but what I loved is it tested my knowledge and my experience, which is fun when
Mm,
you can dig in and be like, oh, this is
mm,
fun.
mm-hmm.
But so I work with startups that are doing one. Well, I don't want to give too much information. They're kind of a couple of them are still stealth, but basically working
On
in
background, we'll talk on
yeah,
background.
yeah. They're basically working with startups and entrepreneurs who are trying to
Got it.
figure out what their product or what their
Mm,
service or what their energy or environmental story
yeah.
is.
And you're
Right?
there because you can see the field.
Yeah,
They're they're
and
they're,
and
they're
so I
they're
help
like
them
they're
with yeah.
blinded by what's in front of them, and I think you're the guy that probably can orchestrate the field for them.
Yeah, exactly. And the field isn't just putting them in
Mm,
front of press.
yeah.
It's for startups and with interest in sustainability or environment or energy or any policy. There are things that they could do to get attention.
Uh-huh.
And so I look at all of those different ways to
Mm,
build around them.
that's awesome.
So I'm working with some of those. I'm working with an individual who is doing some AI work in the healthcare
Nice.
space, providing guidance for him. So it's an interesting guy who just is the kind of person who, well, he's posted about some of this work. His name is Walter Kerr,
Mm-hmm.
Kerr. and he's a former. I worked with him in Congress. He was young, right out of high school, and the Congress was like, "You can come work for me, but you got to make a promise you're going to go to college." And he did.
Mm, mm,
And then he went to the Foreign Service. He became a Foreign Service officer at the Department
mhm,
of State. And then he came out and he did other things, but he created this organization called Unlock US Aid. And then he sees these other problems. And if you look up his LinkedIn profile, Walter Kerr, you could see what he's been doing
mm,
to try and
mhm,
help people with
mhm,
billing in hospitals. And he's working now
mhm,
on stuff like that.
mhm.
I get to wake up and work with people like that. So it's tech,
Yeah,
it's energy, it's environment, and
cool.
and I've done all of this. So I feel like a mile wide and a mile deep
Yeah,
because I've had this broad experience. I don't like to boast, but I feel good about that experience. And
love that.
and look, people should give me a call. They should
Yeah,
they should just send me a note. We'll have a conversation. It'll be
let's see where it
probably
goes.
give away too much free time.
Well, I mean, we
I'll be
are. I
honest.
mean,
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
we're we're educators. I think that oftentimes at this point of our career, we're not consultants. We're really business coaches that just
yeah,
so
yeah.
happen to know how to manage public affairs, public relations, and so on and so forth. Outside of chasing your clients down, doing all the great work, and you love a history and ripping it up there in Concord. What do you do in all your spare time? What's fun for you?
Yeah, I've been doing a bit of volunteer work
Great.
with the town.
Okay.
So I'm on the DEI commission here because
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of good we can do,
Mm-hmm.
um, for the community.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's become almost a dirty thing to talk about DEI, but I'm proud of it. And
Whatever.
I think, I've worked on the Conquer 250 stuff here,
Nice.
and backed off of that a little bit. It was just a lot of time, and we got through the Conquer 250
Mm-hmm.
itself. But man, I love to find people locally who I can meet, like you. I mean, not very local, but if they have a dog and they want to talk about work and possible collaboration, I'll grab my dog, they'll grab their dog, and we'll go for a walk in the woods,
That's not a bad
just
idea, right? Like
to
a
talk.
business networking dog meetup. That's a pretty solid idea.
Yeah, and
We
and
should do that.
one-on-one is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
You get to have these good conversations. I love to help out with even the school talking about, maybe they don't have to put this on the taxpayers. Maybe the thing that they need can be funded through the federal government and
Mm,
they can get good communications on so I just love to give free
yeah.
advice.
Yeah.
You know, uh,
Because you can see the field, right? You can see the field. Good stuff. Love that. No, it
if you're
sounds
not
like
gonna if you're not
good.
gonna hang up on me, one
Yeah.
question I'm interested in hearing from you
Fire away.
because you are a former journalist,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
I would love to hear the name of one reporter, one journalist who you have known, whether you worked with them directly
Uh-huh.
or you just knew them
Uh-huh.
and are friends with them, or
Uh-huh.
who really impacted your craft, whether as communications or as a journalist. Who was the
Yeah.
reporter that you
So
worked?
I'm going to rip off some names, but I got one in particular. So, Walter Robinson, Sasha Pfeiffer, Margaret Zendez, Steve Kirchen, that whole Spotlight crew learned a ton from them
Yeah.
because I sat in
Yep.
that newsroom. But my first editor was Dave Morrow. Rest in peace.
Hmm.
He was the assistant night editor for the Globe. And so the first time I covered anything, which was like a car wreck in the city of Boston, right? Went out to the scene, did about 50 twills, which was 50 lines of copy, came back submitting my first article for the Globe, right? I'm like, hell yeah,
Hmm.
I'm going to win a Pulitzer Prize, yada, yada, yada. I submit this thing and Dave stands up from his desk. He goes, Martelli, come here. I walk over to his desk and we're working on ATEX machines at the time. And he goes, did you read this piece of shit before you sent it in? I was like, oh, I was devastated, like rocked.
Yes.
And he goes, I could sit here and tell you all the great things you did or rewrite it, but I'm going to tell you my feedback and I want you to go back and rewrite this thing. And literally, I wasn't holding up the paper and it was going to be somewhere in the back ass end of the obit section or like buried in the fourth page of the sports. Nobody was going to read it, right?
Where everyone
But
looks for the Pulitzer.
yeah, yeah. And he hammered me for like 2 hours on this thing. And finally, he talked about the diamond, right? Where it's like, get to your lead, provide the context, fill it with information, come back to the lead, end the story. Because at some point, if they cut it literally on the pagination, you don't have time to tell this glowing story. You're covering a car accident. Get to the root of the story. And so that first shift in that first submittal was a catalyst for everything. Before I hit send on anything, I say to myself, did you read this piece of shit?
Yeah.
Every single time. So Dave Morrow is my guy. And he was
Here's
never
to
a
Dave Morrow.
reporter. He was just an editor. Just was kind of sat there, drank his coffee and old bald dude with a beard and just kind of beat the crap on my stuff. And to this day, I think about that moment. I think about the friendship that we built over time. But it goes on and on. I mean, I was from 93 to about 97, 98, thereabouts. working in at the Globe in the middle of that newsroom with Pulitzer Prize winners. You'd see Bob Ryan, you'd see Dan Shaughnessy, Adrian Walker,
Mm.
Donald Coyne, Shelley Murphy, Mike Resendez, Walter Robinson. Like it just went on. And then my last 6 months at the Globe, I used to work. I used to do a shift up at the State House. So Frank Phillips, Meg Valancourt, like it was the crescendo of the Globe before the Times bought them, and then the paywall showed up and everything else. And that's I could sit there all day and talk about everybody, but that Globe experience has
Yeah.
been a catalyst for everything I've ever done in my career. But Dave Morrow is my guy.
Yeah. But that was in the '90s, right?
Yeah,
Until the 2000s, right?
yeah,
The early 2000s?
yeah.
And it must have been such a different thing where people sat in the newsroom. There must have been this cool buzz, right? Like, what was
I'll tell you the
that like?
story. So I started the Globe because I was a co-op there first. And I was only a co-op because I was a business major at Northeastern and I hated the stats class. And the guy, my advisor said, "You're too late to the program. I only have two options for you. Either go drive a Budweiser truck or go write about
Hmm.
dead people at the Globe." I'm like, I'm a pretty decent writer. I can put pen to paper. So
And
went
dead
to go
people are
work.
good
Yeah,
interviews.
yeah. Look, totally. They don't get no feedback. Like Dave. So I would, I went to the Globe my first day, and this is my last Walter Robinson story. So I'm sitting in the middle of the newsroom, and I'm looking at like three of the same newspapers, but different front pages, and from the same day. And I couldn't figure out why there was different versions of the same newspaper the same day. And Walter Robinson's like, "Are you that new kid from Northeastern?" I'm like, "Yeah, Mr. Robinson." He's like, "Go give me the papers." And he does one of these. And he flips up and open. He shows me the stars. So in the Globe, your first edition had 3 stars, and your third edition had 1 star. Back in those days, when the paper came off the press, they would deliver the third editions up to like Maine and the Cape, and they would
Mm.
drive the papers out. And as you got closer to the city of Boston, second edition, first edition, sorry, the third edition. The third edition covered like all the late West Coast sports scores that came in from the freelancers out in the West Coast. So they'd have different versions of the paper. And that morning was the morning after Marissa Tomei won the award for My Cousin Vinny. And the late paper had her photo on the front page versus the first edition didn't. And I was like, and so like that instance, like, and then as a newsroom gets to about 3 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, keyboards are going, phones are ringing, and it's like a loud Italian reunion. It's just like mayhem. I called my advisor the next day. I said, "I'm not sure what this is, but I want to be a journalist in some way, shape, or form." Changed my major and went through my co-ops. Graduated. No,
That's awesome. I love that. I wish at one point I had spent time in a newsroom. I never went through an agency in terms of having that background, which I think in some cases isn't great, but in many cases I think is a benefit. Just realize it's not a template, the work we do,
correct.
but having those mentors like Dave, and people who are honest with you. And I've had a lot of those, especially when I was a newbie on the first campaign in Connecticut. When I was a real newbie, it was like Daniela Altamare. She was tough at the Hartford Current. But then there was actually this other guy, and she was great though. I mean,
Yeah,
great,
tough but fair. I'm sure.
tough. Yeah, you had to earn your story, and when you gave her something good, you
Yeah,
got the best headline. But
love it.
you had to earn it,
Yeah,
and like most reporters, and but then there was this guy, David Lightman. David Lightman was even then in the mid 2000s was old school, right?
hmm.
Gray haired guy. No offense to myself, whatever, but old school at the Hartford Current. Really smart, long history, and then he went down to become the DC bureau chief at the Hartford Current,
Hmm.
and then he went over and became, I think, the White House correspondent for McClatchy.
Nice.
Dave was polite. Dave was, and I don't know if he's even alive today. I've tried to find stuff from him. I just can't. Maybe he's just retired and living in the Keys. But I loved him because he was kind, he was nurturing, he was open about feedback. And then I learned to ask him for feedback, and he knew me as a newbie to Connecticut.
Nice.
And really in the campaign world, he'd done so many campaigns with PR folks. He'd never had anyone ask for feedback. And then that's when I think he opened up. And then when he was in DC, he called me up and he asked me if I wanted to go to an awards celebration. I think it was at the National Press Club for some big lifetime award for somebody. He didn't even mention it was for him until I showed up and everyone's congratulating him. And I'm like, this guy didn't even tell me it was for
That's
him.
cool.
There were Congress people, like there was Favreau from Obama staff sitting at me, and that was a new,
Nice.
thing going on. And it's like, oh my God, all these people are here for him. And he never said it. I was like, sure, I'll go. I'll go to this dinner where there's going to be free food. I'm a poor staffer on the
Yeah,
Hill,
love
and that's
that.
and there are a lot of those people. And you see some of the younger writers, and not necessarily younger, you know, Ted Mann, who was at the New London Day. I met him, and he was an upstart at the New London Day. And then he did some really cool stuff with the governor over there. And then he went to the Wall Street Journal. He's
Nice.
now doing something else. But he's younger. He came from a newer generation, not the new generation, of course. But he still carries with him that sort of austere respect for journalism. But he looks at you, and he's very handsome, so it's hard not to look back. But like when he looks at you, you know he's hearing you, he's thinking, he's absorbing. That's the kind of person you work with. But you love to work with.
And you're right, because you come across those journalists that just don't have the time for you. But you in this business, we network all the time, right? Clients, journalists, producers, podcasters, guys like us that just meet. And that's frankly what drives me to do what I do. I love meeting people, love networking, and getting to learn people's business and stories and telling them in some way, shape, or form. But that's been good. Brian, got to wrap it up.
You're doing it.
Thank
you. Don't have to. You own it.
I know I don't, but I do own it. But I do have some calls coming up for clients I got to get rid of. But anyways, you and I can talk. We'll do this again. We will find a way to partner. That's for sure.
That'd be great. It'd be a lot of fun.
Timestamp it. Chat below. We'll find a way to make this happen. But
everyone hold us accountable to work together.
So if people want to work with you and they want to find you, want to learn more about what you do, how can they do that?
You can check me out on monumentsquare.llc. That's my website. It's okay. My email is brian@monumentsquare.llc.
And what's your networking platform of choice?
LinkedIn.
Got it.
It's not by choice. I think LinkedIn is now the Facebook for old people. I don't know. It's strange, but that's where they'll find me at. Just look up Brian Farber in Concord.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you stopping by the bunker, having a good
show.
You. I appreciate the little back and forth and the checkers analogy and the back and forth. But I appreciate you being here, and good luck with everything. And folks that want to reach out to Brian, I encourage you to do so. A smart dude, doing a lot of great work in the space. In comms, communication strategy, policy, public affairs. People that are on this podcast get it done, and they know what they're doing, and Brian's one of those guys. So, Brian, thank you again for being here.
Thank you. Be well. Thanks to Mark Girolamendi for putting us together.
Gyro, my man Gyro. Yes, we have a mutual friend, and Mark is a good friend of mine, good friend of yours. He's just a solid guy. Good stuff.
I'll let you go. I've now tried to delay you many times.
You have, but it's all good. That's what we do at PR. We just string on the conversations.
Keep them on.
Excellent.
All right.
Exactly.
Talk to you later, Don.
Right,
Be well. Right. Thanks to the PR Bunker.
Thanks, Mel.
Be well.
Thank you for joining this episode of the PR Bunker podcast. The PR Bunker is a PR and strategic communications agency working with mission-driven and impact-focused organizations. Our job is to tell their stories and fuel the mission through growth strategies. Know of someone that would be a great guest for the podcast or looking to grow your organization or business through strategic storytelling? Visit prbunker.com for more info and reach out. The PR Bunker podcast can be found on any streaming platform and social media. Please subscribe and share so you don't miss an episode. Thanks again for stopping by The Bunker. I'm your host, Don Martelli, and I'm out.